And then God said, "Let there be light," which is the topic for this tutorial. Now we want to create the look of a morning kitchen. Do you guys know that in 2022, and then God said, "Let there be light," which is the topic for this tutorial. Now we want to create the look of a morning kitchen countertop. Like you just woke up in the morning, the sunlight's coming in and it's warm and it's inviting. So we want to have some sunlight coming in from the left. Now we could take our default lamp here and turn it into a sun lamp and then try to angle it like that. But the reason that this looks so terrible is that one of the key components of natural light is not just the sunlight, but the skylight around it. Getting that the right shades of blue and white and the gradient as it goes towards the horizon. And that's actually quite difficult to do. But thankfully, there's a relatively newish feature in Blender which we can use. So rather than using any lamp at all, I'm going to delete the lamps so there is no light in my scene whatsoever. And instead, go to my world tab here. Here, and then where we've got color, I'm going to click the little yellow dot and then select sky texture. And what this has added is besides just the sky texture, it's also added in a sun lamp. So if I rotate around, we should see, look at that, real sunlight coming across it. Now it is very hot by default. So if you go to your render settings, underneath color management, at the very bottom here, you've got an exposure slider, which you use actually quite a lot. You can see the lighting has stayed the same, and it doesn't have to re-render anything. This is purely just adjusting, the sensor essentially on your camera. And if you hold down Control, I usually just snap it to a -2. Now back to the sky settings. So what this is, essentially it's created the exact look of the sky, a real sun lamp. that little sun disk over there, and everything will change depending on what you set, like the elevation, right? If you set it to be like
It's been hard to breathe with the weight of the world on my chest. At times it seems the all I ever get are just hard times and dark nights and sleepless tossing and turning. Maybe one night I'll win one fight. All this time I've been learning the art of not giving in. The art of not giving in. The art of not giving in. The art of not giving in.
really low in the sky, well, that's like morning light. You can see it's changed everything to be like a warm look, right? So we've got like really warm light over everything. And if you change it to be like noon, like the sunlight is coming directly above it, you can see it's a lot colder. And that's because as the sunlight goes lower in the sky, it's now passing through more of the atmosphere. So it's like decaying the light, and you get, you get like an orangey look. But as it goes more vertical, then it's a lot more clearer and cleaner. Anyway, it's a very cool setting that is relatively new in Blender. But yeah, so I'm actually going to leave it at the default at around 15 degrees. The one thing I will change though is the sun size. So you get like really, like clean, hard shadows from the sun. And this sun size here, the reason for this very weird measurement, 0.545 degrees, is because it's actually the real sun size in relation to the Earth. But there are reasons for changing that, because if the sun goes through a cloud, then obviously the cloud is now lighting up and it's creating more of a dispersed look. So from the look of the camera, I usually just adjust this to be like a 2 or a 3, and it just makes the sun a little bit softer around the edges and a little nicer, at least according to me. Awesome, so looks better, but now we have another problem, which is that the skylight is just bleeding in from all directions, right? Because obviously it would. So we need to create an enclosure around it to obviously act as an indoor space. And just before we do that though, whilst I was preparing for this tutorial, I noticed that the donuts are a little close to my backsplash here. And that matters because we're going to use depth of field later to make things that are behind it are like out of focus, but we can't really do that if it's too close to the backsplash. So I'm just going to increase the distance there and also just scale it up a little bit, because now that it's in the background, otherwise you'll see like the corners actually appear in the render, which we don't want. So just make that a little bit bigger, move it up. Okay, that's pretty good. So essentially, yeah, you just want to have like 1, 2, 3-ish plate widths, I think will do it. But yeah, something like that. And I also now just want to make sure, just fiddling around with this now, but yeah, this has got to be positioned exactly on the plate as well. Awesome. Okay, so that enclosure. Obviously, to create that enclosure, we are going to be adding in a cube. So Shift A, Mesh, Cube. And I want to scale this down because although it is like a kitchen, right? Nothing outside of the frame is going to be in the shot. So making it bigger than it needs to be is just going to add to the render times, because then light has to bounce around those things, and yeah, not good. So yeah, something scaled about that. I don't know, something like that. Now, really what I want it to do is just like that corner here, I want it to be locked to this point. Like I want to move it to that point. And previously in Blender, this was a really fiddly process. I would have to tap G and then Z, move it along that, and then try and time it here, and then tap G and then Y and move it. And it would never be exactly correct. It would always just be slightly off. Well, now there is a new feature in Blender, literally, that came in this release, 4.0, that has changed the game. So there was a bunch of snapping improvements. So I will show you them now. So it's actually easy to understand if you just go into wireframe mode. So if I tap G, so I'm moving my cube, if you hit B, it now enters you into a new state called snapping mode. So the first thing it's asking you is what is the origin of the object that you're moving that you want to be the snapping point. So essentially, as I mouse over this, you can see the cursor is changing. When it's a circle, that means it's gonna snap to that face. If it is a crosshair, that's that edge. If it's a triangle, that's the middle point of the edge, which is sometimes useful. And if it's a square, then that's a vertice. So this is on the object that is selected right now, okay? So I obviously want that corner vertice, so I'm just gonna do a single click there. Now, after I've clicked, you can see I'm able to select whichever point in the rest of the scene I want to snap it to. So just like, again, it's a square when it's a vertice. So when I'm on these faces here, right there, I'll do a single click. And there we go. So you can see it's perfectly aligned it with the bottom of that backsplash there. Now it is a little weird, I'll be honest. Like, maybe it's more weird because I've been using Blender for so long. Maybe beginners find it a little bit easier. But yeah, like the fact that you're in a move state, then you're hitting B, and you will be moving it, but it's in a snapping mode rather than a placement mode. It is a little weird. And also, just to make it even more complicated, you can hold down Alt at any point and then middle mouse to drag around. Because sometimes you want to snap like that point, but then you need to select a point underneath an object. So you can hold down Alt middle mouse and then find that point and snap it to that. So that's even weirder, but I'm very glad it's in there because it is great, but it is just like takes a little bit to wrap your head around. But I will continue using it actually. So in face select mode, in edit mode, you can see this is too high up. So I can just, I could try and place it like this, or I could hit B and then go this point to that point. Same here. G, B, this point to that point. Yeah, it's pretty useful. I mean, it doesn't have to be this exact. I mean, this is just stuff that's outside of the frame. But anyways, all right, and I'll move this out. So I do need to create a little bit of space here because the camera needs to sit here, obviously. So there needs to be a bit of space there. But if I move inside, you should see some flickering. Yay for flickering. The flickering is because obviously the cube comes with 6 faces, but we've already got 2 planes right here. And we don't really need those planes. We could actually map a marble texture to the cube, but then you have to deal with UV unwrapping and all that stuff. I find it's actually easier sometimes to just work with planes and use that instead. So instead, with the cube here, I'm just going to remove the 2 faces that I don't need. So the back face and then this bottom face. So selecting those 2 and then hit X, which is another way to delete, and not vertices. That's what we've been doing currently. Instead, hit faces. So it's just deleting those faces. So now you should see you have, it's kind of like an open box, 4 sides, and then the back and the bottom are open. And now what I need is an opening on the left-hand side to be that window. So to do that, I'm gonna cut into it so that I get a little bit of gap here on the left-hand side to be like the gap between the wall and the window, and then another gap here between, the bottom of the is an opening on the left-hand side to be that window. So to do that, I'm gonna cut into it so that I get a little bit of gap here on the left-hand side to be like the gap between the wall and the window, and then another gap here between the bottom of the countertop, and So I'm going to inset, and for that tool it's I. So I for inset, and it's now kind of like it's shrinking that face into itself, and you're just like choosing its scale essentially. I'll hold down Shift to get a more precise movement, and about there. That's pretty good. And now I just delete that face. So again, X and then faces. Awesome. So we should now see this, which in rendered view mode, should hopefully look okay. Yeah, not bad. Now this window frame here, it really is just acting like the control for the light. So if I want, I can much more precisely place this. Like I don't want that much light coming in, creating all that light on this side of the wall there. I can also say maybe I need more space here so that I've got a little bit of darkness so I could put some things in the background without them falling into light. And then this bottom face here, this bottom edge, this is going to control where the light starts in the scene, right? So if it's like all the way down here, then it's, anyways, you get the idea. Just sort of shaping the light. Awesome. And now with the camera selected, I'll just move this down a little bit, angle it up. There we go. course. I mean, you can also just do this in fly mode, shift tilde key, but I like hitting the R tool and then just selecting the axes, and I can just tilt the camera exactly where I want it. Awesome. So much better. We've controlled the skylight, so the skylight is now longer coming in, but we have uncontrolled lighting in the sense that this wall here, that's over here, that is supposed to represent the rest of the kitchen, is hitting and receiving all of that sunlight, and it's just filling in all of this space on the right hand side. And that's not good because we want shadow. Shadow is actually a good thing. It helps reveal form. A lot of new artists, like, they get scared of shadow. They try and like fill everything in and light everything. You do want shadow. Shadow is a good thing. So all this uncontrolled space is not good. So essentially we need to do just like what you would do in the real world, and that's to create a, like what a photographer would do. They make like a black fill card, right? And that's just to essentially stop bounce lighting from hitting the subject. So it's a good excuse to learn about a new feature. So with the cube selected, if I go to the materials and then hit new, we're gonna keep the white material for everything else, right? White walls. But then I can add another material right underneath this one by hitting the plus button, then adding another material, and I'll call this one black wall. And I actually will change the shader from principled to a much simpler diffuse. It's just easier for cycles to calculate than a full principled one. And then this, I'll just change the color to be really dark, almost black. All right, and now in edit mode, I'm gonna go face select, and I'm gonna select that one wall that I wanna have the black. Wall material to, and then here I select it from the material list, black wall, and then hit assign. And importantly, you won't see the assign select, these buttons. They'll only appear when you're in edit mode. So if you don't see it, it's because you're not in edit mode. So in edit mode, select the face, then you'll see it and hit assign. And now look at that, we have much more control. And in fact, because this light, sunlight is hitting this wall and it's currently dark, this color here now becomes almost like the control for how much fill light I want on the right hand side of the donuts. So the brighter it goes, the more fill light I get. Yeah, just a very simple way to control that lighting a bit better. Awesome, that's looking pretty good. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the sun intensity. So there's a separate measurement here just for intensity. Now you could drop the intensity of the whole sky texture as well, but when you do that, it also drops the sky texture, right? And so I found it was like, for a while when the feature came out, I was like it was very hard to control. But I realized, like, if you keep the strength at 1, but then you reduce the sun intensity, you could, like, for example, reduce the sun intensity like by a lot, and then increase your exposure. And then it's like the sunlight is there, but it's a lot softer, right? It's not like so overbearing. But essentially what I want to do, I'm going to set this sun intensity to 0.5, so it's half of its brightness, but the sky texture has full brightness, so it's just a little, yeah. A little less hot, essentially. Awesome. Now, 2 things I will show you, right? It's not like so overbearing. But essentially what I want to do, I'm going to set this sun intensity to 0.5, so it's half of its brightness, but the sky texture has full brightness, so it's just a a little, a little less hot, essentially. Awesome. Now, two things I will show you before we close this tutorial, which can be useful to know. One is how to import a model, okay? Because although as a beginner, it's good to understand modeling tools and know how to build things, when you start building scenes, it's very common, professional artists in studios, to just make use of model libraries, because there is so much you need to model and basically fill in to create a realistic, believable scene. It's just too much for one artist to do. So it's very common to make use of model libraries. So what I want you to do is click the link in the description and you will find this model, the wood utensils, which we're going to put in the background, is a free model. And it's available in multiple softwares. The one we're looking for is the Blender file. So hit download on that. And then just like before, unzip the file that you receive. And inside it, you should see a bunch of textures and then one .blend file. Then we're going to go to File. You would think import, but actually this is for external file extensions, like not blend files. If you want to import a blend file, it's actually the append option. Okay, so now we select that .blend file, double click it, and now
you do what I do? I'd even stand as the gunner do. Or would you do what I do?
Oh, we're actually reading the blend file. We're reading the information inside that blend file, and it's saying, what do you want to import? Do you want to import just a single object from that blend file? Do you want to import, a texture or a material perhaps? But in a lot of cases, if it's just a blend file that contains like one model, it's often going to be in a collection, a single collection. So go into collection and then just click the one that's there and then hit append. And now, even though there is multiple objects as part of this, it's just brought in all of them and it's put it into a collection already, utensils jar 001. So now I'm just going to move this into the back of my scene, and that's it. So that's how to import data from one blend file into another. It's going a little slow for me. I'm going to move that. There we go. So I just want it, somewhere in the background like that. The other thing I want to show you how to do is how to install an add-on. Because although you might think that's kind of like an advanced user thing, you will very quickly realize that a lot of workflows rely on add-ons. So add-ons are very powerful and there's a lot of them out there, and it's not actually clear how to install add-ons to beginners, so I thought I would include that. So obviously we're going to use the Polygon add-on. I mentioned this earlier. It just lets you like download and import objects with one click. And there's a bunch of free models in here as well, so you can actually get started with those and do some interesting things. Click the link in the description. This will take you to the download page, and you're just looking to download that. Great, so you can see it's downloaded a single zip file. And importantly, you do not want to unzip that zip file. And the reason is that Blender installs add-ons from the zip file that is unextracted. So to install an add-on, you go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then at the top, click on Install, then locate where you downloaded the zip file, just that there, and then you just hit Install. And now if it's correct, if it's like found and located an add-on inside that zip file, it should then automatically take you to the name of that add-on in the search, so you just have it there. And then to enable it, you just do a single click to check it, and it's now enabled. Now obviously every add-on will have a different way of accessing it, but commonly they are in the sidebar, which is exactly where the Polygon one is. So you'll see the tab here. They might actually be changing the sidebar at some point in the future, but for now this is anyway how it is. So then just go log in via browser. It's going to take you to the website. It'll say login confirmed. return back to the add-on, and you can type in free, and you can see a whole bunch of different assets there. So actually one that I will import, if I go to my models section and then go to vegetation, there's a bunch of different plants here. There's like 4 free ones, I believe, so you can use one of those. I'm going to be using a paid one, just this spider one I thought looked quite nice. But yeah, you can access one of these free ones if you want to. And there we go. Awesome. So this is our render. We are nearing the finish line. I can feel it. We're getting close. So join me in the next part. We're going to dive into the composition and then animation and then the final render. So click here and I'll see you there. We are on the home stretch. Well done for sticking with the series. It's a lot of work, a lot to retain, but well done for sticking with it. Now, a couple of things before we jump into compositing, the fun compositing stuff. I noticed a couple of things that I could tweak to the lighting just to improve it. And it's important we do it now because what we're going to do next relies on the lighting being correct. So the first is I noticed that the light rotation, it would be a little bit better if I rotated it so it's almost like a 90-degree, like completely side on to the donuts. So that's pretty simple change. The other one I noticed is that I'm getting this like kind of ugly bounce light coming off this, both the plate and the table. So to fix that, I can just move, right? Go into edit mode, edge select mode, select the edge of this window. And then if I just drag it, you'll see that the light just disappears off the front there. And now I have controlled the light. Now the other thing, speaking of control, I noticed looking at this wall, like I was trying to tweak it and just try to improve it, but this is like a huge source of light, right? And so if you look on our donut, it's not very controlled, right? I could either, if I want to fill in this space, I could increase the brightness of that wall, but you can see it throws light just everywhere, and I don't really have any control over it. So, change my mind. Let's not use that as a fill source. Let's just drop the value to 0. So there is now no light coming off of that wall. It is a black void, which is actually pretty, I mean, that's like a photographer holding up a black fill card next to a face. And instead, excuse me. Okay, quick break there. Had to get a drink of water. Instead, I'm going to add in a lamp, okay? So I'm going to shift right mouse click so that I drop it on the ground here in front, to the side. And then I'm going to go shift A, and I'm going to add in not a point lamp, not a sun, but an area lamp. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It looks like a plane, right? Flat square thing, and it casts it in the direction of that arrow. So I want to rotate it along the y-axis, just holding down control, and in the top left you can see we get a 90-degree angle, so that's what I'm looking for. And then the size of this, I want to drop the size in the setting there. Okay, so I just can go really small actually. And now, if I pull in close with rendered view mode, we should see a lot more control over where that fill light goes. All right, so I can pull it in nice and close, right? Now that's obviously way too bright, so I'll just now dial that back like so. And I can now pull it forward so that I get the fill light exactly where I want. But that that's 3D, right? You try out an idea, you're like, okay, that could work. And then you look at it and you're like, maybe not. I'll try a different one. But yeah, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a yellowy tint, and that's better. Awesome. Okay, so now we can do some compositing. But first of all, what is it? Well, the compositor is a way to add effects to the final render. So that could be everything from a simple color grade to like really stylized renders. So in our case, we're going to use it to add glare to better emulate a camera. That's really the purpose for this tutorial. So at the top of your screen, click on the Compositor tab. So this will arrange your screen again, disorient you for a moment. But yeah, wouldn't you believe it? It's another node screen. So click Use Nodes at the top there. For whatever reason, they always appear off your screen, at least in my case, maybe it appears on yours. But if you middle mouse up or just scroll down, you should be able to see it, or you can just hit the home key as well, and that'll bring it into focus. So it's actually pretty similar to like geometry nodes in that on the left-hand side, this is your original, like what you've started with, your original render. And then on the right-hand side, it's going to be your final output, like that's what's going to be saved to an image. And then in between here, you can put whatever it is you want. You could put a color grade. You could do some post-processing glare and shine and things like that. But before we can see anything, because normally you would see your result here, we can't for two reasons. The first is we haven't done a render, okay? It's not enough to just look in like rendered view mode here, right? This is just like a temporary view whilst we're moving around. We have to do a proper render by hitting F12. But if we did one right now, we'd be waiting a while because the maximum samples is 4,000, which is it's probably pretty good for like film animation production quality, but it's overkill, and especially for this, like we're just doing some test renders. So let's set it to 100 samples, and that'll do it way faster. So now let's hit F12 on that. There we go. So that came through for me, 7 seconds. Again, I got 4 3090s. It'll probably be a little slower if you're on a laptop, but yeah, just be patient. It'll come through. Now go to the compositing tab, and we still can't see it because we need to add a viewer node and connect it to this. And you can do that just by holding down Control, Shift, and then left clicking on your render layer. And now we have a viewer node, and in the background we have our render. So some people find it like a little weird to have the render connect it to this. And you can do that just by holding down Control, Shift, and then left clicking on your render layer. And now we have a viewer node, and in the background we have our render. So some people find it like a little weird. To have the render in the background, you can move it around just by holding down Alt and then middle mouse button, and then middle mouse button will move your nodes around. So Alt, middle mouse button for the background, and then middle mouse for the nodes. Anyways, as a very quick example, let's do a simple color adjustment. So adjustment, color balance, right? Drop this in here. Now, if you just dropped it into your viewer node, then this would be just what is going to be shown in the background here, but it wouldn't be adjustment. So adjustment, color balance, right? Drop this in here. Now, if you just dropped it into your viewer node, then this would be just what is going to be shown in the background here, but it wouldn't be saved in your render until it went through your composite node. But for just this quick effect, it's good enough. So this is a graders know exactly what this is, but it's for on the left-hand side your blacks, right? Your midtones is in the middle, and the right-hand side is your highlights. So if I wanted to make, you know, I don't know, like a cooler midtone, and then like a warmer highlight, right? And then, I don't know, something for the blacks, like make it more green. I don't know, just make something horrible. You could do it here. You could make simple color adjustments. You could do it there. And your original render hasn't changed. This is just a post-processing step. But actually, on the note of making things look more contrasted and punchy, I wouldn't actually bother with the color balance node. We used to, but now Blender has some pretty good color management. So I'm gonna hit Control X on that to just remove it, but retain its connection. And then if you go down in your render settings to color management, there is a look drop down here. So if you set this to high contrast, that's exactly the same as like what we were doing there, like trying to like increase the highlights or reduce the midtones. It's a very common thing to try and make something look punchier. And these looks will do that, but do it really well. A lot of people make the assumption that this is like, you shouldn't use these, or it's gonna like mess with the colors in some way. And like other applications, true. A lot of like art apps, they just, you know, you use one of their contrast settings and it just starts like clipping highlights and things. But this was designed by Troy Sobotka, who understands color science and color management. So it's a proper S-curve. You won't have any clipping going on. So I use this all the time. Usually the one I go for is a medium high contrast look, and it just makes a really nice looking result. By the way, just a quick mention, in 4.0, this version of Blender, we switched the view transform to AGX, which creates more realistic looking images, because previously it was on Filmic and it looked like this. And you can see the difference is AGX it just looks more real. But the reason for that is that Filmic was, and actually the same with Aces right now, the film, like the one, the Academy, all the people in VFX use and everything, it's got this same problem. But when you've got color, the more exposed a color is, it should actually start to desaturate. But what Aces and what Filmic was doing is that it was making that color more and more saturated. So that's why these bright colors here are just starting to get ugly, right? But AGX fixes that, and it starts to behave more like film, where it desaturates those colors as it exposes for it. So very cool, and I'm glad that they've got that. While I'm here as well, I'm just going to increase the exposure a bit. It's going to blow it out a little. Anyway, we'll fix it a bit with the lighting later. But anyways, okay, back to the compositor. So one thing that I often use the compositor for is for what you see in the real world, which is glare, right? If you've got a shiny metallic object, a bumper or something like that, you want to have that starburst, right, coming off it, because that's what you see in the real world. You see it both with your eyes, like if you squint at something in the distance, you'll see like, like this kind of like starburst around like a street light at night. That's actually because of the eyelashes on your eye. But on a camera, it's for a different reason. It's because of the optical elements. It's kind of like refracting around itself, and it's creating this starburst look. I don't understand it fully, but I know that it's an artifact which has artistic use as well. So we are going to add it. It is a little fiddly, I'll be honest. Like other software, they just have a button and it just like adds the bloom and the glare and stuff. We have to do this for now. So Shift A. We probably could if more people donated to Blender, right? We could have stuff like this, but anyways. So not to guilt you all. Filter, glare. Okay, and that was Shift A, by the way. Same hotkey, works everywhere. And drop this in. Okay, so we've got little starbursts. We've only got 4, which is not ideal. We want as many as we can get, really. So drag it up to 16. That's better. Now, there's 2 values here you really want to change. The first is the threshold. That'll decide how much of the image is affected. Like, as I drag this up in value, it means only the really bright stuff is going to be affected. If you dragged it really low, then like everything is going to give off a starburst, and it's not going to be what you want. And the other one is the mix value. So if you drag it all the way to 1, then it's going to be just the effect by itself. If you drag it all the way to -1, it's going to be the original render. So if you wanted a nice blend between it, you could go like a -0.9 or something, and then you've got the starburst over the top of the original render. But if you want to blend this with something else, I find it best to actually drag the mix all the way to 1 so that we're just looking at the effect by itself. I can then also, let me just quickly adjust the threshold so that I'm only getting it in the really bright places. Yep, that's good. And then I can blend it with another effect that I want. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D, and that's going to
Sometimes I cannot breathe when you look at me like that. I'm falling in. You don't even have to speak. I'll be calling out your name. Not that I could have feel this way. You came up on me like a rape inside it. Now I feel the sun. Sometimes I cannot breathe. I try to distance myself, but this just nobody else that feels the same as you do.
going to duplicate it, but it's going to keep it connected to my render layer here. And then this one, I'm going to make the fog glow, because looking at reference, it's not just the starburst, but it's also got a like a glare, like this glow, blurry glow coming off it. So the fog glow is that look, right? It's just that.
Sometimes I cannot breathe. I try to distance myself, but this just nobody else that feels the same as you do. Sometimes I cannot breathe.
And let's increase the size, I think. And let's set the quality to high.
Sometimes I cannot breathe.
gonna like mess with the colors in some way. And like other applications, true. A lot of like art apps, they just, you know, you use one of their contrast settings and it just starts like clipping highlights and things. But this was designed by Troy Sobotka, who understands color science and color management. So it's a proper S-curve. You won't have any clipping going on. So I use this all the time. Usually the one I go for is a medium high contrast look, and it just makes a really nice looking result. By the way, just a quick mention, and actually the same colors here. If you've got a shiny metallic night, because starburst, I'll be honest, it's a blender, right? We could have stuff like this, but anyways, so not to guilt you all. Filter, glare, okay, and that was Shift A, by the way, same hotkey works everywhere, and drop this in. Okay, so we've got little starbursts. We've only got 4, which is not ideal. We want as many as we can get, really. So drag it up to 16. That's better. Now, there's 2 values here you really want to change. The first is the threshold. That'll decide how much of the image is affected. Like, as I drag this up in value, it means only the really bright stuff is going to be affected. If you dragged it really low, then like everything is going to give off a starburst, and it's not going to be what you want. And the other one is the mix value. So if you drag it all the way to 1, then it's going to be just the effect by itself. If you drag it all the way to -1, it's going to be the original render. So if you wanted a nice blend between it, you could go like a -0.9 or something, and then you've got the starburst over the top of the original render. But if you want to blend this with something else, I find it best to actually drag the mix all the way to 1 so that we're just looking at the effect by itself. I can then also, let me just quickly adjust the threshold. So that I'm only getting it in the really bright places. Yep, that's good. And then I can but if you want to blend this with something else, I find it best to actually drag the mix all the way to 1 so that I find it best to actually drag the mix all the way to 1 so that we're just looking at the effect by itself.
chance to say sorry. You don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If you never come back, then you'll never know. Can't open up that door and it's stuck closed. Can't even figure out what you're waiting for. But what you're waiting for, you don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If you give yourself another chance, then I'll do the same. 'Cause we've got these broken pieces that we need to arrange. If I never get a chance to say sorry, you don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If I never get a chance, you don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. You don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. You don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me.
I can then also, let me just quickly adjust the threshold so that I'm only getting it in the really bright places. Yep, that's good. And then
You don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If I never get a chance to say sorry, you don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If I never get a chance to say sorry, you don't need to take the blame, yeah, it's on me. If
I can blend it with another effect that I want. So I'm going to hit Control Shift D, and that's going to duplicate it, but it's going to keep, right? It's just that. Let's set the so is add basically. All right. Now the way Blender works, unlike photo, in that respect, and you want to like rip it in, it's not. Maybe. And then let's set this to a 1. By the way, so the composite. Maybe I explained. Anyway, the composite is going to be what's saved into your render. The viewer is just going to be what is displayed in your background here. So if you don't have something connected into the composite, it's not going to be saved when you do the render. Okay, but that's pretty good. So that's how we've got a very quick glare effect over everything. It's a little heavy. I might just drop it back a bit because we want it to be just enough that you can see it, but not crazy. By the way, if you want to zoom in your backdrop, you can hit V, will shrink the size of it, and Alt V will zoom in. They really need a better one. I agree. I agree with that. It definitely could be better. I think there's, you can control it like that. Okay, so if you hit your viewer node, you've got these little, okay, you can do it like that as well. But yeah, V and Alt V, it's like a keyboard shortcut from the old days of Blender. And anyways, all right, dial it back. I don't want to go too heavy. Like the thing with post-processing when you're doing stuff in the compositor is you can you just get distracted. You just get like hypnotized by the effect. And it's so common to have a render that a beginner has done that's actually pretty solid, but then they have just really hammed up the post-processing effect. So don't do that. Don't get overly obsessed with it because it's almost certainly overkill. You just need to dial it back to less than you're comfortable with, and then it's probably right. Because whilst you're adding it, you get really excited. Anyways, that's what I found myself. The other thing I'll show you is if we just bring up this bottom window. I don't know why Dope Sheet is the selected one. It makes no sense for the compositing layout. But if you click the little drop down in the top left, change it to 3D viewport. And now in rendered mode, click the little drop down next to it, and you should see at the bottom, you've got options for compositor. So let's click always. And what you'll see is that the compositing effects, what's happening up here, is now being composed live.
I feel so alone.
Over the top of your your viewport. And this is a very new feature. I think it's actually 4.0 is when it was officially added in. But it's huge because it means you can do and preview your effects whilst you're looking around your scene. So you could like look at this, like, hey, I can see the exact amount of that glare that's coming off it. You could do, you can do crazy stuff in the compositing, and it'll show through. Like as an example, there's a new Kawahara filter that looks like this. This kind of like painterly style, and you can you can preview it like live in the 3D view. It's like I feel like I'm looking at a painting right now, right? It's really crazy that you can do this real time. So I'm really glad it's finally in there, because it's been talked about for like a year, I think was when it was first previewed. So it's really cool that it's finally in here. So one thing I will use it for actually is to check that the threshold that I've set for the fog and the streaks is actually correct. So I'm going to look through let's go to the streaks. I think streaks is it's a bit slow, but anyways, let's pull in here. And let's just take a look. I might have to add in a little bit. Okay, there we go. I have to add in a little bit of the the original render so that I can actually see, but I just want to make sure that it's mostly coming through on the metallic objects. So I might actually try increasing, so you can see as it's like all the way at 0, you're just getting everything is going to get star beams. But then as I increase it slowly, it starts to disappear, and then the only thing that's really getting it is those metallic objects. And that's generally the look that I want to go for. So so I went for a much higher amount threshold for that. Anyways, you could have a different amount for the glow, but I think it's generally one and the same effect. So I want to add is underneath, where is it? Transform, lens distortion. Okay, if you add in this node, this can replicate an effect that is actually in all cameras as well, and that's lens distortion, all right? Like, you know, reconnect and disconnect